Everyone, we've learned a lot here from Rajiv, and I want to say that for a lot of us in the second generation, I'm looking at all you guys over here, the kids here, Rajiv's been an inspiration because he took on the professors at the universities. In 1990, I studied in one of the classes that Rajiv's talking about in the book, University of Michigan, Introduction to Hinduism, 1990, August. Madhav Deshpande, first day of class, said the Vedas were written by drunk people. And until Rajiv came, there was nobody fighting this. So Rajiv's done this all on his own. Let's give him a big round of applause. Rajiv ji, I mean.
Now, with the introduction of Indic Dialogue, I would now like to introduce our guest speaker for today, Rajiv Malhotra. Rajiv Malhotra is a researcher and public intellectual on civilizational studies, world religions, and cross-cultural encounters. He was trained initially as a physicist and then as a computer scientist, specializing in artificial intelligence back in the 1970s. After a successful corporate career in the US, he became an entrepreneur and founded and ran several IT companies across 20 countries. Since the early 1990s, as the founder of his nonprofit Infinity Foundation, he has been researching civilizations from a historical, social science, and mind sciences perspective. He's authored several best-selling books that have impacted many leading intellectuals worldwide. Rajiv also serves as the chairman of the board of governors of the Center for Indic Studies at the University of Massachusetts in Dartmouth, and is on the advisory board of the Indian Institute of Advanced Studies in Shimla. Now, I would request Falguni ji, we first have a bouquet to present to Rajiv ji, and then I'll ask him to take us through his latest book, Snakes in the Ganga, Breaking India 2.0.
Namaste. Since a lot of you are tech people, and that's a common thing we have between us, so I want to tell you what I do. Because people say, why one day you're talking about this thing, and the next day you're talking about something else. And each book is a different thing. So the key word I want to discuss is the word algorithm, which all of you know, because that's what you are spending your life doing. So there are two relationships to algorithm. One is discovering the algorithms that already exist. So in physics, you're discovering nature's algorithm. Like, how is this electron moving? What is its algorithm? How are the tides moving? What is the algorithm? So you build a model and you have an algorithm of some part of nature. Could be biology, could be chemistry, any part of nature. So in that sense, discovering algorithms is one part of what I do. Discovering the algorithms that exist means looking at some social phenomena and figuring out how does it operate. If I can flowchart it, if I can develop an algorithm that says that this prejudice, this bias operates in this way, these are the 3 stages or 5 stages, these are the mechanisms, this is where the funding comes from, this is how the process starts. The process, when it starts, it goes through this particular stage, like an assembly line in a factory. So this idea, this knowledge goes in this manner. If I can model it as an algorithm, then it means I've done a pretty good job of understanding and uncovering what that phenomenon is. So a large part of what I do in each book is I try to uncover algorithms which our people don't understand. Our people are reacting. So it's like, if you don't know the algorithm for eclipse, then you sort of react each time it happens. Or you don't know the algorithm by which some disease happens, and then you just sort of react emotionally. So our people are emotionally reacting to different phenomena which concern us, and not knowing the algorithm by which the other side is operating or by which society is operating, we're not able to anticipate, we're not able to predict, we're not able to make sense why it's happening, who's doing it, why they're doing it. So in other words, the algorithm, discovery of an algorithm is a way to make sense of something that exists. And this part is called Purva Paksha. Purva Paksha in our tradition is the discovery of the algorithm to the other side. Okay, that's about Adi Shankara used to do all this Purvapaksha. And we stopped doing it. And because we stopped doing it, when the Muslims came, then when the British came, and Portuguese, all these people came, we didn't do the Purvapaksha then. We didn't understand them because we didn't bother to develop this kind of a thing. We are supposed to in our tradition. You see? And then the Uttar Paksha response is, I'm going to build an algorithm, how to respond to this algorithm, how to refute it, respond to it, cut it short, hit back, whatever is my response, I'm going to have my Uttar Paksha. So, algorithm discovery and algorithm construction are the two parts to each book I do. So you can look at every book, and I won't write a book unless I have figured out some algorithm which is complex, which is of consequence, it cannot be trivial, and which makes a huge difference to us if we understand it, because then we can counter it. Like you cannot counter a disease unless you know the whole pathology. So understanding the pathology of a disease is figuring out its algorithm. That's really what it amounts to. So in this book, this Breaking India 2.0 is the byline. 12 years ago, I wrote a book called Breaking India that started a huge revolution, a huge movement. In fact, publishers didn't want to publish it. One of the guys that we all know, an elderly person, I won't name, he gave copies to several people. He said, this is all sensational, just creating trouble for us. People didn't want to face it, because the algorithm showed how serious the whole thing is. It is not some random, this happens by chance and then this happens, we put out a fire and we put out a fire. It's not like that. The algorithm shows that it's a whole systemic thing, and there's multiple layers, like in any complex architecture. And there are many, many forces, many players. And we need to figure out how to disrupt the equilibriums, because certain equilibriums exist. And how do we make an algorithm to disrupt? What is the right point where to disrupt? So that's how that book was done. On the cover, I have this map of broken India, because I was having lunch, so I'm kind of always listening and figuring out how somebody is giving me data to figure out some algorithm. Always I look for data in that sense. So I was having lunch in Princeton, and we did some professors in the university, and one African-American young man came to join us. He was introduced, and he said, I've just come from India. I said, oh, that's interesting. What were you doing there? And he said, I was part of the Afro-Dalit project. So I said, oh, what is that? He said, I have Afro-Dalit project. So then he was very matter of fact. He says, the project where we were projecting that the Dalits are like Africans, and he was an African-American himself. So I was very fascinated. I didn't want to alarm. I wanted to pull out information, because that helps me with my algorithm. So I invited myself to his office, and he had that map. The map I took a picture, and I put it in the cover of the book. And he gave me a lot of information on which church, where is funding this and sponsoring it, and how they're empowering the youth and giving them a sense of history, that they are actually African blacks and they were made slaves. And this has been going on for a long time. I would say this was soon after 2000. And it took about a decade for the book to come out, because I was talking about it and gathering my data. So the project started over 20 years ago. Now, when the book was ready, the publisher said, I cannot put this map on the cover, because we'll be sued, we'll be accused. What do you mean by breaking India? I said, well, this is a project. I'm giving you the algorithm of this project. And I'm giving you all these sources. You can check it out. So, I've never seen a cover before where the picture of the cover, on the cover, there's an asterisk which says, this is not true, this is not a true map, as if he has to cover himself. Obviously it's not a true map, but he says, no, we have to say it because somebody may think that you are calling it a true map. That's how scared our people were. And I was denied entry into each and every temple for talking, because they would say this is sensational, he's going to create trouble, we don't want, we don't want to rock the boat. So this is how we started. So then each book has kind of modeled some aspect of the narrative, the discourse that concerns us. And how the narrative currently is, what is its history, how it operates, and then the counter-narrative from our side, which is our algorithm, how to deal with it. That's how I've done it. So this latest book, Snakes in the Ganga, is a metaphor for poison being spread by people called snakes, and there's a systemic institutional mechanism to create the poison. In other words, poison is the ideology, the Breaking India ideology, the Hindu-phobic ideology. And this is, snakes are bred, activists and scholars are created, whose job is to spread this. In media, many people are trained in Washington Post, New York Times, BBC, Wall Street Journal, think tanks, US government, policy centers, a lot of policy centers, US Commission of International Religious Freedom, think tanks in India, including Niti Aayog, which is the top government think tank, and think tanks on so many policy areas that would surprise you. So this is the reason Ganga is mentioned is because in the Ganga, when you're taking a dip, you don't expect that the people around you are snakes or dangerous people. You expect everybody is okay, this is a very safe place. And the point I'm making is, hidden from view, hidden from visibility, underneath the surface of life, which seems very nice to us, there are these threats, and we are going to pull them out. So that's the algorithm. It's many, many layers of algorithm that have been uncovered in this. And it's very exciting when you discover one of those and it works, and you check it against all the data, run all the data, and it handles it. Then you say, okay, I got something. Then you develop it, the next step and the next step. So that's what this is about. Harvard is the nest of snakes, we discovered. And so is Stanford, but little brother. Stanford is a kind of a smaller version. Harvard, because of its stature, reputation, people just take it for granted that whatever Harvard has said must be okay. So Harvard has taken it upon itself to come up with a huge narrative on India, train, I think, according to our investigations, this narrative, Harvard has trained maybe a couple of thousand Indians so far in the last 5-10 years. When you include those who got a PhD, those who specialized in it, those who came for a conference, those who were given a grant, those who were part of some event they sponsored in India. If you look at all the people involved in all the different programs and projects they've done in this particular area, it's at least a couple of thousand, maybe even more. So they've trained a lot of snakes and they put them loose. So now the question was, how do you describe the DNA of the poison? Because that's the poison, we need to understand the algorithm of the poison itself. How does this poison work? And this poison, if you look at it, is, you might call it Marxism 4.0. And I'll tell you why. Original Marxism was an economic class theory that said every society can be modeled as oppressed and oppressors economically. And Marx did not want to separate them by religion. He was very clear, or race. That comes later. Only economic class. So those who don't have the means of production, who are the landless laborers, that's the oppressed, or factory workers, and those who own the means of production, they are the oppressors. That's Marxism originally. In the Second World War, they were unable to explain why Germany, during an economic depression, did not have a communist revolution. Russia did. Lenin started this Russian revolution. But Germany had the same economic problem, but it did not go the communist way. So they were very traumatized at, that the theory doesn't work. So they wanted to amend their theory, they came up with Marxism 2.0. And 2.0 is sort of cultural Marxism, which is not about economic. It's not just economic strata, but cultural. Those who own the means of cultural production, theater, movies, discourse, like the kind of thing we're talking about, discourse, narrative. Those who own the means of narrative production can spread a view, a worldview, to keep the masses numb and happy like they're on opium. They're just feeling very proud and chauvinistic. So the Germans did a very good job of that, according to this Marxism 2.0, that they kind of replaced the economic misery with cultural chauvinism and pride, that we, the Germans, are superior. So this became known as the Frankfurt School of Marxism, because it was developed there. After World War II, during it also, some of these Marxists from Germany migrated to the United States. Some came to Columbia University and some came to Berkeley. In particular, one important man called Herbert Marcuse came to Berkeley, and he developed what I'm calling Marxism 3.0, where he said in the United States, to create an upheaval, you need to use race. That's his genius. It's not economic, it's race. Because he saw there's a lot of racial stuff going on, blacks, Hispanics, there was the civil rights movement. So he came up with the precursors of what later became called critical race theory. He didn't coin that, but he came up with all the premises, and then the people later on developed something. First they developed critical legal theory in Harvard Law School, professors did. And then from that they developed critical race theory. And they're quoting all this stuff. So when I have arguments with these critical race theory people, they try to deny that it has anything to do with Marxism. And I show them all this background. The founders of critical race theory are very proud to be quoting all these things. So if you see all the problems you are facing, you have to understand these things because you know where it's coming from. Where does cancel culture come from? It comes from here. Where does this business that, the Marxist idea is that there is a hegemonic discourse which the oppressors have made. The oppressors made the hegemonic discourse, and now we need to topple that, and we need to create a counter-hegemonic discourse which will represent the views of the oppressed. And to allow the oppressed to make this counter-narrative, you have to cancel the voice of the oppressor. So if you are designated oppressor because you are of a certain type by birth, then according to the theory, you should not be allowed to speak. So freedom of speech only goes so far. You do not have the freedom to continue propagating oppressive speech. So this is Marxism 3.0. Marxism 4.0 is when some Dalits arrived at Harvard, collaborated to give this Afro-Dalit project a new theory. And they turned critical race theory into critical caste theory. So now there is this critical caste theory which says that caste is race, and Dalits are blacks, non-Dalits are whites. So, according to that, and you guys are victims of it in the Cisco case and all these things going on here, but you need to understand, chapter 1 of this book gives you a very clear analysis and understanding of this whole thing, so you will know what they're talking about, where it's coming from, how to interpret it, how to counter it, where its weaknesses are. So this critical caste theory has taken the Afro-Dalit movement to a new level. And the pioneers of it are people at Harvard. So they've adopted this guy called Suran Yingde. He's the poster boy, and he's collaborating with the black scholars there, and they really love this guy. This whole Equality Labs takes this idea and wants to gather data and surveys to establish this and turn it into lawsuits, which you guys are facing. are dealing with. And then there is a person called Ajanta Subramanian, who's written a book on caste is the foundation of IITs. It's a big attack on IITs. Chapter 4 of this book is on Ajanta Subramanian's attack on IITs. And that's a Harvard professor, and it's published by Harvard University Press. It's a very prestigious press. She's gone all over. It's part of their curriculum. They're really pushing this hard. And according to them, you see, in Marxism, you want to dismantle the structures, this whole business of dismantling the thought. Where does the word dismantle come from? The dismantling the structures of abuse, dismantling the structures of the oppressor is a very central part of Marxism, and is carried over to 2.0, 3.0, 4.0. So now the mapping says, the mapping of all this onto our culture says that Hindutva is an oppressive structure because it was put together by upper caste people, whether it was or not, that's what they're saying. In the same sense as white supremacists came up with much of the structure of American society, and we have to topple that. So now there is an attack on meritocracy. This might surprise you. Very clearly, that meritocracy, which says that everybody has equal opportunity, is not a good idea, because when you give everybody equal opportunity, Asians do much better, and blacks don't do so well. And so, equal opportunity is called equality. That's the old liberalism. The old liberalism is equal opportunity, and let the outcome be whatever based on merit. The new DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, uses the word equity rather than equality. Equity is not the same thing as equality. Equity says you want equal outcomes, not equal opportunities. Because if you give everybody equal opportunity, outcomes are not equal. Some people will win, some people will lose. But you don't want that, because that will not help society. The underclass will remain underclass. So what you want is to produce equal outcomes, which means you want quotas on, the outcome, how many people should get in from this identity or that identity, into Harvard. And there's a Supreme Court case, all of you know, which is being fought, challenging this whole affirmative action, because affirmative action forces equal outcomes rather than equal opportunity, letting the chips fall where they may. So the problem, first of all, this challenging meritocracy is so deep in this book on attacking IITs. It basically says that the whole concept of meritocracy in IIT is a sham. It's Brahminical, privilege that is deeply embedded in the structure, and a nice, polite way is to call it merit. So you feel like, you can feel nice about your success based on merit, but actually that's all baloney. Really, it is caste privilege. Just like white privilege gives people a lot of advantages in the United States, caste privilege does in India. So now the theory is, putting all these things together, the theory is that Indians are bringing caste into the United States. And we got to be very careful. We have to do censuses wherever they are, in Silicon Valley or wherever there are a lot of Indians. We have to do censuses. We have to make new laws, and we have to say that if there is an overrepresentation of certain caste, underrepresentation of certain caste, then the outcome is not right. We need to maybe change the H-1B visa so that it will be caste quota. We have to do that. So next, you don't be surprised if one day somebody goes to the U.S. Embassy and the questionnaire also asks about caste, and to see these laws could happen. That there is a lobby for that. So there are caste sensitivity workshops going on in Microsoft. I know people had to attend them. I know in Facebook they've had to attend them. And what the Indians were told was, the people who told me about it, was that you just keep quiet and attend the whole thing. Don't raise questions, even if you don't agree. Don't rock the boat, because they call you a racist. So people are very scared. They have to just sit quietly and listen. And they find it very embarrassing and humiliating in front of their white friends that their whole background is being trivialized and demeaned and made fun of in this kind of a way. And many of them don't even know what this problem is all about. Many of them were born in this country. Many of them came from other countries. They didn't come from India. Many of them have mixed parents. So, it's a very complicated thing to apply this to everybody. It's a very nonsensical thing. So this, once these policies take root in the HR departments in the United States, you will quickly see them take root in India in their subsidiaries. Microsoft India and Google India and Apple India, they'll all start doing this. And the pharma industry, which have subsidiaries there. And all kind of companies when they're outsourcing. I mean, there are laws that say that when you're outsourcing from China, you cannot outsource from a factory if there's slavery or if there is a denial of human rights. So you have to do some surveys and you have to check out certain things to satisfy the US regulators that you're not buying products from people who are violating social justice. So this will all happen in India, and the casteism is going to blow up in a big way. And that's why I wrote this book, because I want you guys to know about it. And people are complacent and they're not understanding and they're not going deep enough to analyze the problem. Looking at it just as something trivial here and there is not going to be good enough. So what I just told you are the first 5 chapters out of the 22. Chapter 6, the 100-page, my response on what is the actual history of Varna, Jati, caste from the Vedic times through the Buddhist times, through the Muslim era, through the European era, and the post-independence era, how it has changed, how it has evolved, what do the different Shastras say, what does the historical record say, and you find that it is a very dynamic and flexible history. It is not frozen, like, there were this abuse going on for a million years. It's not like that. You'll find different regions had different experiences. You'll find there's a Shudra dynasty of kings. So a lot of things have happened during history, and you cannot just totally singularly blame the Vedic heritage and say that that has to be dismantled. The idea of dismantling Hindutva is actually to get rid of the whole religion, the whole faith. Okay? So, whereas it's certainly desirable to get rid of abuses, I think everybody would like to get rid of abuses. There are abuses in the Catholic Church, they have so many sex scandals, but no one said dismantle the church. No one said dismantle the church, but they had enough abuses. They just said, let's fix the abuses surgically. And you don't have to dismantle the whole structure of Christianity. There are so many abuses in Islam. So many. And nobody has said dismantle Islam. But dismantling Hindutva has become a very serious agenda. And this is something that we have to understand. So then part 2 of the book has 3 parts. Part 2 of the book, you should try and get there, it'll be interesting. I hope it doesn't get cancelled. But at Stanford, one of the most anti-India, Hindu-phobic scholars is over there. And he's called the Reliance Dhirubhai Ambani Professor. So I have written a whole dossier on what he's written. And I've sent it to Mukesh Ambani and said, in the name of your company and in the name of your father, who was a great man, this is what is being done. Now, do you agree with it or not? If you say I agree with it, okay, it's your right, because your money, your hard-earned money, and I'm not saying you have no right to do this. You have a right for free speech, and you have a right to come up with all this stuff. But you have to be clear that we are informing the public, we are informing the government, we are informing everybody that your name and your money is being used for this. And if you still want to continue, then continue. But if you think that you should go and check it out for yourself, then please do so. So you see, we're trying to light a fire under them. But they have to feel accountability, because these people have made their billions in the Indian market because of Indian consumers. They are heroes, they get rewarded and awarded and all kinds of things. And if they are outside the country doing these things, people ought to know. We're not censoring them. I'm not trying to stop them. I'm simply exercising my right to critique them. That's what I'm doing. They have a right to sponsor people who critique India and its heritage. They have a right. And I have a right to critique them. That's all I'm doing. And if they can't take it, they can't stop me, because we were worried that my publishers, I'll tell you a story. A major publisher was going to publish this book. I won't name because they're friends of mine. One of the top few in India, big publisher. Less than 90 days before release, this guy calls me, the owner. He says, we can't do it, because we get blacklisted by all these billionaires. and it will be bad for our business. So I said, that's terrible. We've been at it for 1 year. We had a whole contract. Why are you telling me now? So he says, no. We've been wondering. We put it through this review. And so I said, okay, tell me what is wrong, what is problematic, and maybe I'll be willing to change some things. In a 800-page book, he had 1,100 changes. Then he marked, his people marked. Don't name Mahindra. Next, don't name Mahindra. Don't name Mahindra. I said, why not? We are naming these guys all over, hundreds of times naming them, because they are naming themselves on their website. The website is Mahindra Humanities Center, at Harvard, and all of these papers are there, these videos are there. There's a Mahindra Humanities Center YouTube channel. I mean, come on. If they are not hiding it, they are not bringing anything secret out, they're not hiding it, so we are just telling you what is out there in the public domain. So we had to then find a new publisher. So this is a new publisher we got. That's how scared Indians are. That you cannot, these billionaires are too big to be criticized. Harvard is too big to be criticized. You see, that's pretty bad. If we are being attacked by people that we cannot even expose them because people are scared, then it's really a serious problem. And I need your help because I cannot keep doing this alone. So that's part two, where a whole lot of different departments and centers funded by Indians, Newman Center of Media, there's a lot of Indian money there. They are training journalists, and so on. There's a lot of these. So I have a separate chapter on everybody. So if you want to understand what's Mahindra doing, there's a chapter. If you want to understand what's Pierre Omidyar doing, there's a separate chapter. If you want to understand what's Lakshmi Mittal doing, there's a separate chapter. So each chapter is a separate story. You don't have to read the whole book, you just read the chapters you feel like. Then there's part three. Part three is how all of this enters India. There we have a chapter on Ashoka University. We have a chapter on Azim Premji. We named Azim Premji. He has a university and a foundation, and they're involved in all kinds of things. Then there is a chapter on Godrej. There is a university called Kriya University in the south. So there are a whole lot of initiatives. Now you see, a big difference between Breaking India 1.0 and Breaking India 2.0 is this, that Breaking India 1.0 was targeting the conversion of poor villages in rural India. Uneducated, low-income people were being converted. They were not touching the elites. They were not going after the businessman's kids. They were not going after Niti Aayog. They were not going after elite institutions. Now, the target, because Harvard is involved, Harvard's reputation has no meaning to a villager. He doesn't know who's Harvard. He wouldn't care. He could care less. He could care less. I mean, if you want to target a villager, the Harvard is not even necessary. Who cares? But Harvard, you bring into the picture and make them into a central player if the target are the elites, because they really are impressed. So Harvard is involved in this at the top of the pyramid of elitism. If you look at India, whether it's industry, whether it's universities, the universities are just named in India. They are private universities. The fees are such that very rich people can afford. It's not like Harvard, but in India, by Indian standards, it's very expensive to send kids there to these universities. So the setting up this kind of a thing, this critical caste theory, wokeism, this sort of stuff, as a ideology, poisonous ideology to be spread in this manner, serves the purpose of breaking India from top down. The previous Breaking India 1.0 was bottom up. This is Breaking India 2.0 top down. So now you are breaking India from the top of society and we're working your way down. So that's what it is. I want to just say one thing, don't let the big size scare you of this book. Okay? You need to read 100 pages, that's it. The way you read this book is you read the introduction and then you read the one-page overview of every chapter. The overview is very well done. I've put a lot of time to make sure what are the most important things that the person should know. 1 to 1.5 pages is the overview for every chapter. So you read the introduction and the overviews, and you get a very thorough idea of what the book is saying. And then you can make a deep dive, whichever chapter you feel like. You don't need to read them in sequence. You don't need to read all of them. You can, if you want to get into the chapter on IIT, attack on IIT, go to chapter 4. If you want to get into what's happening with the Afro-Dalit, chapter 5. If you want to get into equality labs, our response to equality labs, chapter 3. If you want to get into Mahindra, how is Mahindra playing a role? Mahindra Center, there's a chapter. How is Piramal or Lakshmi Mittal, there's a chapter. So the table of contents gives you all this. So you look at the table of contents and you can very clearly say this is what's going on. And we've also covered MIT. There's a Harvard-MIT Nexus. In MIT there is something called JPAL. J is the name of initial of a Saudi guy, very big Saudi guy. And PAL stands for Poverty Action Lab. They've got these Indians who got the Nobel Prize in economics. They got them into this. These people are also involved in supporting AAP, Aam Aadmi Party. There's stuff out there. And JPAL, so JPAL is Saudi money funding these ultra-left in MIT in the name of solving poverty. What they're really doing is a lot of interventions into India's security, integrity, India's self-esteem, all coming up with all this rabble-rousing negative propaganda. So when you wonder, why is this happening? Who put out these articles? Who is instigating some county here to instigate some caste? Who's behind all this? It is not some localized effect. It is not that there's some 5 or 10 local people. They are not that smart. The people in Washington who put up some bill on Islamophobia, there was a bill on Islamophobia. They're not, those guys, they're not that smart. You know, the bill said that it would be a criminal offense under the US law if somebody engages in what is considered Islamophobia, which is very subjective. Who is going to decide that? And the bill said that the US State Department will make a special cell of Muslim experts to adjudicate charges of Islamophobia anywhere in the world. So it passed the House. It passed the House, by the way. It passed the House, and then Senator Cory Booker of New Jersey, who is my senator, and I funded him, I've supported him and all that, he put it on the Senate floor. And I was so furious. So I tried calling him and explaining to him, but he was not in the mood to listen because he was under some pressure. So I went public. I said, "Dear Cory Booker," and I went, "This is against the US Constitution because you cannot separate one religion and give it special privileges. You cannot do that to Islam. Your bill does not talk about Hindu phobia, Jewish phobia, Christian phobia, Buddhist phobia. It only talks about Islamophobia. You can't do that. And then you are getting in the whole business of adjudicating who is against Islam, on what basis, who decides. Even the Muslims themselves have a very complex history. And why would you want to do all this?" So he had too much pride to admit that he should back out because this thing went viral, my letter went viral, a lot of people knocked at his door, a lot of people who donated and said, this is bad. So the bill never went anywhere. It's sort of just in cold storage right now. It could be revived, but as of for the last year or so, it's not gone anywhere. So this is the kind of negative actions that keep coming up, whether it's a riot somewhere, whether it's a media article somewhere, whether it's an attack on Cisco or some county here, or new law that says caste is racism, we're going to do census of everybody's caste. Whatever it is, these are not random sporadic events. They're coming from a well thought out think tank. And this theory is very well thought out, very sophisticated, and a whole lot of people have been developed and turned loose. And so we need to prepare our side. And that's why I'm here. So maybe I'll stop right now and take some questions. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Actually, we have quite a few questions already, and I've been capturing them on this iPad. So I'll start with something more, because we have a lot of teenagers and all in the audience. First, what has allowed the West, US in particular, to become so vulnerable to these self-destructing ideas? And how does this relate to the Black Lives Matter?
Very good question. So the book, when I start writing a book, I sometimes have a certain idea, and then the book changes into something else. So I was writing a book called Breaking America. This book was going to be called Breaking America, because I was talking about how this kind of ideology is breaking America. And in this, there is a section called Breaking America now. I summarized it. But that 300-page draft is still there. I'm going to publish a book called Breaking America. And a lot of white conservatives want to join these. They think it's a very important idea to write about Breaking America. We're going to do some conferences. We're going to coin this term, Breaking America. So, the United States has now become the hub of Marxism. This is something most Americans do not believe. How can we be Marxists? We hate Marxism. But in the name of critical race theory, that is what Marxism is. It's a reincarnation of Marxism. So Black Lives Matter was an important movement. I supported it because what happened to George Floyd was really tragic, and everybody who has a heart would go out and support him. And we supported him. But the point is that was soon hijacked by the Marxists into this critical race theory and Muslims. So you see what happened is this coalition is coming together of blacks who were genuinely in need with a whole lot of academic Marxist left people who had these theories to use and the Muslims. They created this kind of a coalition. So the theory is that the oppressed are blacks and the oppressed are Muslims. Muslims are oppressed. So when you are oppressed under Marxism, you're called a protected class. So blacks are a protected class, you cannot say much to them. Muslims are a protected class. It was based on Muslims being a protected class that they came up with this law on Islamophobia. Because they're a protected class, therefore you better not hate them. We are not protected class, so Hindu phobia is allowed. And all other religions phobia is allowed because we're not protected. So you see, who gets to be protected depends on who is classified as a victim. So this is like a big championship going on, and who gets to be the victim. And so they've done enough lobbying, put out enough examples, case studies, emotional. I think blacks deserve, I clearly believe that. But this business of extending this victimhood to other categories is uncalled for. And applying, another thing that people should know is there's a difference between Wokeism / critical race theory. Wokeism is a popular term, critical race theory is a more academic term, same thing. There's a difference between that and liberalism. Most people don't understand. The liberalism of John F. Kennedy, of Martin Luther King, of the civil rights movement, of Jimmy Carter, of Bill Clinton, all the way up to Barack Obama, was not wokeism, because they were not talking about dismantling structures. They were saying equality, not equity. Martin Luther King was very clear. He wanted equal rights. The whole equal rights movement was equal rights. It was not equity. It was equality. So what is new in the left is this thing called progressive. Being a progressive is different than being a liberal in the left. I'm a liberal. I've been a Democrat most of my life in the liberal sense. And I like liberal because a liberal would never do cancel culture. A liberal would say that everybody has an equal right and you win, lose based on the merit. They are for meritocracy. So I have a table here on liberalism and wokeism. And you see the big contrast. So wokeism is a kind of Marxist cancer that has entered American society and become like a new religion. And it's going to have serious consequences for the United States. And our problem is that it's now been refurbished for India by our own people, funded by our own billionaires, and that's pretty dangerous.
Actually, as an extension to that, you said the move away from meritocracy and more towards this idea of equity. There's been a lot of discussions about the quality of education in like the UCs, for example. California is really big, but in Stanford and Harvard, with this changing world order that everyone's talking about, how do you think the position of institutions like Harvard and Stanford will be viewed in the world?
So Harvard and World Economic Forum. World Economic Forum is a Harvard offshoot. You guys should know that. Klaus Schwab, who is the head and owner and founder and runs it, he's an old guy now. He was a student of Henry Kissinger at Harvard Kennedy School. Okay, that's where they came up with this idea. Kissinger considered him one of his most brilliant students. They came up with this idea that you need a mechanism which is not accountable to anybody. So it's not a university, it's not a government, it's not an NGO in a traditional sense, it's just an organization called World Economic Forum that has unlimited money. There's no transparency of where the money comes from, where the money goes, and they decide who will be in, who will not be in, and they create brand value for any individual to become well known, have a brand value. Indian politicians lining up there, Indian businessmen lining up there, everybody wants, Indian musicians, artists, movie stars, everybody wants to go there. Because when you go there, you get this thappa, you're now being shot in World Economic Forum. But World Economic Forum has a very deep ideology about disrupting the world order. And this is, all of this is summarized in the conclusion chapter of this book. Why? The question that I won't answer now because I want to read the conclusion. The question is, why would multi-billionaires, these Zuckerbergs and Bill Gates and all these kind of people, why would the multi-billionaires who made the money in capitalism sponsor and fund wokeism, whose ultimate objective is to undermine capitalism? Why would they do that? Well, I have an answer. It's a pretty serious answer of how they benefit in their goal, in their long-term thing, using all of this to achieve what they really want to achieve. So the actual thing is only 30 pages, you should read it. And you get that answer.
So, there's a lot of discussions on whether politics influences culture or culture influences politics. And what are your thoughts on that? And the second thing is, what changes are you noticing in India and in the US among policymakers or key officials post the publishing of this book?
So that's a very good question because a huge change happening, but I'll come to that. Culture and politics have a symbiotic relationship in the sense that when there's a cultural shift, people's ideas change, people's idea of selfhood changes, and their priorities change, and who they want to be representing them and what policies they want changes. So culture feeds into the political process. Politics is top down because politics give you power over the machinery. There's a huge state machinery. You've got all these large budgets, a lot of bureaucrats. You've got heavy-handed policing authority, law enforcement. You can make so many things you could do with the control of the government. So politics gives you control of the government. The government is the mightiest machine out there. And if you have control of that, then you can also influence the culture. So politics certainly allows you to re-engineer, do social engineering of culture. And culture can influence, if it's a free society, if it's democracy, you can certainly influence politics. Now the second question is, what's the impact in India? So this is very interesting. I've written 9 books. This is the first time I got so much coverage. And mainstream media, all the big TV networks and all of them, and we didn't even go to Bombay. I'll be going back in February because the number of invites is so many. Once we go to Bombay, we have to spend these 10 days. So all the time, I was there 35 days, it was Delhi, Bangalore, Chennai, and Ahmedabad, and that's it. But we have invites everywhere you can think of. Now, besides the huge traction in media, there's also a large interest on the part of the government. I don't want to discuss certain things in public, but let's just say that people in charge of these kind of security issues, national sovereignty, issues of India's safety at the highest level. I've had multiple conversations, very private, in which they are very concerned about these things. They want to listen to all this, have their staff read all this, and get advice on what are we supposed to do. So I've given them my take on, you got to look at this further, don't take my word for it, you got to check it out, here are some implications. But certainly I feel that the government is going to wake up and somebody will put pressure on these billionaires. And there are some foreign forces in India. If you read chapter 22, it's a huge American billionaire. People talk about George Soros as a bad guy. But George Soros is in the 80s. And he has a few billion. I mean, you can't say it like he's a rich guy. But I'm talking about a case study of somebody who's multiple times richer and half the age, and tech savvy, and knows all this big data, artificial intelligence, capturing data, coming up with a parallel government, almost like using new technology to create services for the poor people and for the middle class, where he can turn things around, he can take over. It's almost like a huge amount of power. And this individual has been under the scanner in other countries also. In one country, he was accused of toppling the government, the same guy. And he's also known as somebody who backs people who kind of come up with infiltration of free speech, and then also backs another venture that it comes up with investigative report on this. So he looks like he's investigating his own, it's sort of like he's on both sides. And so he can turn the knob this way or turn the knob that way. Very clever, extremely intelligent person. So when I mentioned this to the authorities there, they're very concerned because he is known as a good guy. And he's got his people all over the Indian government. You know, the Indian government, foolishly in my opinion, relies on policy making from the United States. McKinsey, Ernst & Young, Deloitte & Touche, PricewaterhouseCoopers. I wrote a book on artificial intelligence, and I criticized this data policy we don't have, privacy policy we don't have, all this big data is being siphoned off, all the Bill Gates of the world are taking all the genetic data, taking data on seeds and whatnot, and data on banking and financial records and legal records of Indian people are all up for grabs, and these foreign entities are doing it. And guess what? The government responded with a policy paper. And who wrote the policy paper? Well, the Niti Aayog brought in all these consultants to help them write the policy paper. And so to set Google right, because I call Google the Google Devata, there is Facebook Devata, there is Google Devata, and we are worshipping them, and they have too much power. This whole geo connection is not very good for us. And what are some of the safeguards we need to have, and what are some of the restrictions we need to place on them, because they could take undue advantage of their power in India. So the problem is that when they decided to formulate these policies, it's the Googles of the world who sent in all their consultants to help them. And the lazy IS officer is very happy because this guy knows, he's got nice slides, he's fancy, he's got all the data. So, if you look at the Indian government policy white paper, they haven't enacted it into law yet, it's being discussed. You look at all that, all kind of statements they're making about what will be the impact on of this big data stuff, on AI, on small industries, medium industries. And you look at the back, the data is quoting some Arthur Anderson report, something like that. I mean, not even our own data that is relevant to our country, but what Arthur Anderson office in London, some guy quoting that, and some McKinsey report somewhere. So our big policy makers are Harvard, very aligned with Harvard. A lot of these policies are made in the Kennedy School of Government. And a lot of these American companies, these consulting companies, go and have infiltrated India. Now the interesting thing is, we thought Infosys is the big one, and Tata Consultancy is the big one. All these companies started as basic auditing, and Ernst & Young was chartered accountants. And from chartered accountants, and Pricewaterhouse and Deloitte, then they started a tech consulting. And then they started consulting into strategic planning, business consulting, and then now they're into policy. So the interesting thing is, there has been no success on the part of TCS or Infosys or any of the Indian consulting houses to enter the policy market. Very strange. In your own country, you have all the tech coolies. I mean, I'm not insulting anybody. I started as a tech guy also. But you have all the tech guys in large numbers. You're very proud that you're doing all that. But when it comes to the highest level, where the companies are actually shaping government policy. It's the American companies shaping Indian government policy, not the Indian companies. Very strange.
So, based on what you're telling us, that the Indian government is aware of it, and they're trying to take steps proactively, but there's the difficulties.
It is going to take a long time to learn all this. I mean, I go back and conduct a workshop. I will do that for them. I've done like several workshops and help them. I've said I want target audiences. One will be government. One probably the son wants me to do a workshop. They want me to come back and do a workshop. Another one I want to do with social media influencers, people who make their videos and YouTubes and all. I want to teach them how they can take this content and put their own name and face and turn it into their own thing. There'll be thousands of them spreading all this stuff in their own name, but they're spreading this knowledge. So I want to conduct workshops for people in different segments of society, from the government. Military is very interesting. This is very interesting. If you look at some of the best endorsements and talks we had, it's military generals, and it's the Colonel Sibal, the former the foreign secretary. Very solidly, he says this is so important. So people who are brilliant people get it right away. I mean, they're not denial, they're not closed off, they're not sort of wondering, why you're doing this, everybody is good, come on, it's a Vasudeva Kutumbakam. I mean, they're sharp and they get it, they really get it. So I'm happy at the traction that we receive. Another interesting country is China. China set up many collaborations for higher education with Stanford, with Harvard, all kind of places, and they are unwinding some of them. They are keeping STEM. They want all the technology, beg, borrow, steal technology. They want that. But the liberal arts, humanities, history, social justice, these kind of things, they're canceling. They don't want Americans to teach them about history, about politics, about justice. When they fund Harvard, they're not allowed to, nobody on their watch, in their departments that they funded is allowed to talk about Tibet or Uyghurs or Hong Kong freedom, not allowed to talk. But when our billionaires fund, no restrictions. You can do whatever the heck you want. So they are working in alliance with their national interest. And we are not. We're working because somebody thinks that it's cool, he'll become a big shot, he'll get his kids into Harvard, he'll have a seat at the table, he'll become a sort of honorary white, he'll rub shoulders with Bill Gates and maybe it'll be good for business, he'll cut some deals. I think our people are suffering from inferiority complex. And the Chinese are not. The Chinese come in, they're demanding what they want for their funding. Chinese have invested more than Indians in American higher education. And they have been very clear about what they want out of it. Only in the last 2 years, the US FBI and all these people have become very, they started surveilling the Chinese money. And I talked to some of the people in US security kind of thing who are looking at, as part of my research, who are doing all this investigation. And they said that it will probably take 10 years to get rid of all the Chinese imprints wherever they are. They got their molds, they got all kind of stuff everywhere. It will take 10 years to get rid of them because it's endless. Wherever you go, there's another person who knows another person, and they've really thought through this and captured the heart and soul of American, higher education and think tanks. They've done that. And we haven't had a strategic approach towards that. Anyone who's got an analytical mind, analytical training, like you guys have, can outperform the people with social sciences training because they're, at the end of the day, not that logical, not that intelligent. Many of them wouldn't get into, IIT or med school or some, science course or something, and they go and do some history honors or something. And they are more into ideology and in peddling emotional stuff, and they have a particular ideological camp they belong to, and somehow or other they reach that conclusion by hook or crook. So the logic is flawed. If you as an attorney, for you, an easy opponent, a nice opponent is somebody whose logic is flawed. It's full of all kind of nonsense, And if you start taking it apart point by point, you find that it's not there. So this is the problem. This is the problem these people face. We have never taken them on. That's the problem. You have to take them on. I mean, I've done this for 30 years. And I'm telling you that if any of you were to say, okay, I'm going to roll up my sleeves, I'm going to quit everything I'm doing, and I'm going to start doing this, within several years, you will be outperforming all these Harvard guys and Stanford guys because your logical training and your rigor is far superior to what they have.
If we talk about the kids, you said that we, as a community, face this inferiority complex, right? I think a lot of it's being pushed down to our kids through social media and what they're seeing about Hindus in India. What can a parent do to educate their middle school or high school kid to stand up for Hindus here in the United States?
So I think that there ought to be some courses, small lesson plans. People should get together. How to answer the following question? How to answer the following question? These are the most important 5 or 10 things people hit you with. And so you make a list of them and how to respond to them. We should have written material, we should have video material. These should be, temples should teach it, parents should teach it, organizations, all kind of Hindu organizations should teach it. We should start a very aggressive thing. You see, the Muslims have an advantage that everybody goes for the Friday prayer. And then the mullah is not just teaching you about God, he's teaching you social issues, social political issues. And in our case, our gurus are not interested in social political issues. They're not very well informed. They don't have policy knowledge about different policies, and they don't understand the different issues. They don't bring in subject matter experts and say, okay, I don't know all this because I only know Vedanta, but I want you as a subject matter expert to come in and teach. We don't have that kind of a luxury because the gurus want to kind of control their audience and keep it to themselves. Temples would be a big distribution channel, a big retail outlet for reaching the average Hindu. If the temples got together and said, we want this as part of what we offer. And this may require pressure from the public because the public has to convince the organization, the Hindu organization, that just teaching us abstract philosophy is fantastic, but that's not enough. Our kids are facing all these issues. So if you put enough pressure and they open these doors, then we folks have to be prepared to develop a curriculum together, all of us, and teach it.
So speaking of the Islamic community, recently in the midterm elections, I think there were about 63 Muslims who were elected at the local and state levels across the country. They've been able to make a big impact in American policy making as well, but the Hindus haven't. What do you think is the reason for that?
I think the Hindus who have been elected are all mixed up. Some of them are actually Hindu-phobic. Like this Prema Jaipal is, and Ro Khanna also. I mean, he's one of your guys here. I don't know if you like it. It's very strange. And I have friends in Princeton, Indian guys who claim they're big Hindus and are funding all these people. So we don't have a strategic plan. These Muslims are not individually, it's not like every individual figure it out on its own. There's a whole think tank that they're part of. So they're the virtual think tank, they have meetings, they have Zoom calls, they help each other out. So when they want to hit somebody or respond on an issue, they can overnight build a document, build a draft because they have a standing army. We don't have that. And this is something the large Hindu organizations should take on because they have the respect, they have the stature. If they were to say, okay, we're going to, under our umbrella, we're going to have so many organizations come and we're going to harmonize them and have some training. We'll bring in the subject matter expert on anything and he'll be training the whole lot of them. We need to share our knowledge. I feel I'm just doing all this and I'm very grateful there's individuals who are helping me, but there is no real system where somebody would adopt my project and my issues and say, okay, now you do your work, which you're doing well, and we will do all this, manage all this other stuff that you need to get done. I have to do everything myself. There is no support. you don't have common support. Muslims do. Muslims do. I had a Muslim friend, a Pakistani guy. He came, he was a very good friend of mine, and he said, you know, you're in the wrong religion. He said, you know, you should think twice. I mean, they don't even care. What are you doing all this for? They actually made me think.
Namaste, everyone. We've learned a lot here from Rajiv, and I want to say that for a lot of us in the second generation, I'm looking at all you guys over here, the kids here, Rajiv's been an inspiration because he took on the professors at the universities. In 1990, I studied in one of the classes that Rajiv's talking about in the book, University of Michigan, Introduction to Hinduism, 1990, August. Madhav Deshpande, first day of class, said the Vedas were written by drunk people. And until Rajiv came, there was nobody fighting this. So Rajiv's done this all on his own. Let's give him a big round of applause. Rajiv Ji, I mean. That's the second generation of me coming out. But what I want to say is, many of you don't know that Rajiv Ji has spent millions of dollars of his own money doing this. His strength is intellectualism. And you know, many of us were more on the activist and organizational side, Raki and I, for example. And we need to support our Dharma Kshatriyas, the intellectuals in our community who are putting this out. Because he's not getting support. If he was at Harvard, I mean, he's qualified to be the chair of 10 universities. That's the kind of academic output he's bringing out. But he doesn't have that support because he's challenging the norm. So it's up to us to support this. There's no institutional support for it. And I think that this legacy of coming out of this material with confidence is extremely important. So I challenge all of you today to create a new algorithm for what you're going to do today. Your money's not any use right now in the stock market. It's going to be 50% in the next few months. All right? I'm not a financial advisor, but that's what I'm saying. But today, create an algorithm where the Infinity Foundation is a part of your charitable giving. Don't go home, don't discuss it with any family members, don't think about it. Before you leave today, go to infinityfoundation.com and you can pay directly with credit card or by PayPal. And what I'm going to say is that if there are 5 people here who right now contribute $1,000, I'm going to match that with 5,000. I already gave Rajiv Ji yesterday a donation. But I'm going to do this on top of that because I want to encourage everyone to donate. If somebody here wants to donate more, please come up. 5,000 is a small amount. There must be some CEO or somebody wants to start a startup company. Please come up and do that. But let's make sure that Rajiv Ji leaves with some funds, and there's 2 other reasons we should do it. We have the concept in HSS, you know, Guru Dakshina. So that's one. Second, he's our guest. He's coming to town. You all would have invited him over for dinner. $100 meal at your home, right? That's the cost today of going out in Silicon Valley. So we have multiple reasons to support him. He's our guest, let's support him for that. He's our guru, let's support for that. So we have at least 5 people here who are going to contribute like $1,000 a month. Can we have some hands? Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, 8. So we have 10 people right here. Everything's going to help 500, 250, 100. We're doing this not just for Rajiv Ji as our guru, we're doing it for the kids. Raki and I are second generation people. This civilizational output is going to last generations. We have our Vedas for 5,000 years. The books that Rajiv Ji is putting out, these are books that are going to last beyond his lifetime. I mean, Rajiv Ji wanted to live for thousands of years. But it's going to last a long, long time because there's nobody who's going to be able to come out with this sort of output. This is our, in some sense, it's a new Veda. We consider Modi Ji, Rajiv Ji our avatars, modern day avatars. These are our gurus who come down to help us out. So let's give a good amount of fundraising. Do not leave without giving some contribution to that. That's our Guru Dakshina, just like we would do it in Shaka or some other place. Thank you.